Welcome back, everybody, to the webinar series on Pirkei Avos, on the ethics of our fathers. And once again, feel free to click on top of the page to take you to the YouTube page, so you'll be able to comment or ask questions. Today we will be learning Mishna Vav, the sixth Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. And once again, we'll first read it inside, explain it simply, and then perhaps go through some of what the commentaries have to say about the Mishnah. So inside, Mishnah Vav, Yehoshua ben Prachya v'Nitai ha'Arbeli kiblu mehem. Yeshua ben Prachya, Yeshua the son of Prachya, and Nitai ha'Arbeli, they received from them. They received from the previous pair of rabbis the Torah. And now the Pirkei Avos will go on and say something which they both said. So Yeshua ben Prachya Omer, Yeshua ben Prachya says, Asei l'chorav, make for yourself a teacher. Which means don't only rely on the way you understand Torah, on your understanding. Rather, make for yourself a teacher that will pass on to you the correct tradition. And the commentaries point out that it is so important to have a teacher that even if the only person that you can find is actually on a lower level than you intellectually, and a lower level than you in the knowledge of Torah, nevertheless, it's still a good thing to make him your teacher, because a person can't think of everything themselves. When they learn, they're always going to miss out something. So therefore, it's always good to have somebody else as your teacher, that person can point out to you the things that you have missed in your study of Torah. The second thing which he says, Uknei l'cha chaver, acquire for yourself a friend. A friend to discuss spiritual matters, a friend to discuss physical matters, a friend with who you will go through life with. If somebody is on their own, sometimes when a person falls, it's very hard to get up. When a person goes through life together with a close friend, together with somebody who he feels that you can pour out your heart to, whether it's in spiritual matters or physical matters, there'll be always somebody to pick you up. As the Pasuk says in Koheles, that it is better to have two people than one, because if you have two people, when one gets up, the expression of the Pasuk is, Ki im yiplu ha'echad, when one person falls down, Yokim es chaveiroi, his friend will lift him up. But if it's only one person, then there's nobody else around to lift you up. Therefore, it's very, very important to always have a friend. And the last statement which he makes is V'havidonis kol ha'odam l'kaf schus, the famous statement that a person has to always judge everybody favorably. That if you see somebody that you don't know if this person is wicked, is righteous, and he did something that you can explain either way, it's a neutral act, you can explain it to be as a negative act or a positive act, always judge that person favorably, always judge him that they have done the right thing. Now let's have a look at some of the mefarshim, on some of the commentaries on this Mishnah. So on the first statement, Asei l'chorav, make for yourself a teacher. The Bartanura, the Rav, explains that the meaning of the Mishnah over here is that Asei l'chorav, have only one teacher. That it's not a good idea for a person to go around and learn from many people. Simply speaking, because that confuses you. It's much better to get direction from one person. However, he asks on himself, and he asks on the Mishnah, that is a Gemara in Tractate Avodah Zarah, that says that if somebody only receives from one teacher, then he will never see blessing in his learning. So, should a person have one teacher, or should a person have many teachers? And the answer that he gives is that it depends on what you're learning. If you're talking about logic, the logic of Torah, a svara, if you want to understand something, then it's a good idea to hear from many people, because there are many ways of understanding things. The more ways you hear, the more different approaches you hear to a certain intellectual concept, the better you'll understand it, the more depth you'll have. But if it's talking about the Messiah, the tradition, not so much understanding, but rather to get passed down the tradition from teacher to student, then it's better to only have one teacher regarding that, just that you should have one clear tradition in the way a person is supposed to act, in the way a person is supposed to keep Torah. The Medrash Shmuel explains that the command Asei l'chorav doesn't only mean make for yourself a teacher, rather it actually means make yourself a teacher. Meaning that a person has to become a teacher, a person has to try to find students to teach Torah to, and like he brings about Shmuel Hanavi, it says about the prophet Shmuel, that he didn't just stay where he was and wait for students to come to him. Rather, he traveled around from city to city to try to find teachers that he himself, to try to find students, that he himself should become a teacher to teach them. The Lechem Shamayim, one of the commentaries, explains a completely different approach. And he says that asay actually means to force, meaning you have to work very hard. And he says that Rabbi ben Prachia is saying that a person should actually try not to become a Rav himself, rather to find somebody else to be a Rav over him. And that fits with a later on Mishnah, which the Mishnah says, Usnoes harabonus, a person should hate leadership, meaning that a person should rather not that he should become the leader over other people, rather it's much better to be a follower, much better to be a student, because leadership comes together with great risk. It comes risk with great risks of haughtiness, of holding of yourself too much, and therefore a person should distance himself from becoming a leader and rather be a follower. And that actually fits with something that Rabbi ben Prachia says somewhere else. And although he was the Nasi, he was the leader of the Jewish people, but he says that before I became a Nasi, I used to say to whoever used to tell me to become Alei Lugdula, to become the leader, I would tell him that I'll take you and put you in front of the lions. Obviously, not literally, but he meant to say that I really do not want to become a leader. I'd much rather be a regular person, much rather be a follower. Although later on he became a leader, but he was sort of forced out of pressure to take on that position. The next statement in the Mishnah is uknei lecha chaver, acquire for yourself a friend. And if you look at the difference in the terminology over here, it's very interesting. It says asay lecha rav, make for yourself a teacher, and then it says uknei lecha chaver, acquire for yourself a friend. Why the difference? Why shouldn't it say make for yourself a teacher and make yourself a friend? Why by a friend does it say uknei? And the answer is because actually it's forbidden to teach Torah for money. How nowadays teachers are allowed to take money for teaching Torah is discussed, but generally speaking, it is forbidden to teach somebody Torah and take money as a result of that. So therefore, it can't say uknei l'charav, acquire for yourself a teacher, because you're not allowed to pay someone to become your teacher. On the other hand, when it comes to a chaver, when it comes to a friend, the commentaries point out that it is so important to have a friend. It is so vital for a person's service to God and a person's journey in life to have a friend to go with you, that it is actually worth it to acquire for yourself a friend, even if it costs you money, even if you have to buy that person presents. The example is brought, or you have to talk to them and try to talk them into becoming your friend. It is still worth it. So vital is the idea of friendship. Of course, it is essential to have a friend. It is essential for your avodas Hashem, for your service to God. As it is brought, it says like this. It says regarding tzoras, when a person has a skin disease called tzoras, leprosy, they would have to go to a chacham, a wise man, and he would examine it to see if it was considered tzoras, if it had the law of leprosy or not. And if it did, many laws would apply. He would have to leave the camp. He would have to go outside. He had to separate himself from everybody else, bring a sacrifice, etc., etc. But it says that a person could examine anybody else's negoyim, anybody else's skin diseases, besides for himself, besides for his own. And the expression is chutz min nigei atzmai, besides for your own diseases, besides for your own problems. And the deeper meaning in that is that generally speaking, a person can only see problems with everybody else. When it comes to oneself, it says al kol pshoyim techasa ava, on your own sins, the self-love, the love that you have for yourself, will automatically cover over all of your faults, and you'll never really recognize them. And therefore, it's very important to go through the journey of life in your service to God with a friend, with somebody else that you're very close to, and that person will be able to point out to you your faults, obviously in a nice way, but show you where you're going wrong, and you'll be able to rectify that and go on the right path. The next statement in the Mishnah is judge every single person favorably. The connection between that and the statement before is obvious. Acquire for yourself a friend. But sometimes you acquire for yourself a friend and it's very good at the beginning, but after a while you start realizing the faults in your friend. And that might weaken the friendship. Therefore the Mishnah continues. You see a fault in somebody else. You see somebody else doing something wrong. Judge him favorably, and that's the only way that a real friendship can last. Who do you need to judge favorably? Who does this apply to? So the commentaries explain that it applies to two types of people. Either it applies to somebody that you do not know. You don't know if they're wicked, you don't know if they're righteous. So therefore, you see them doing a neutral act, an act which could be bad or could be good. Just depends it just depends on the context. A person is obligated in such a situation to judge that person favorably because you have no idea where he comes from, who he is. You have to judge them favorably that they've obviously done something good. Another case we have to judge favorably is if you see a very well-known righteous person who you know is righteous do something that actually looks like it's not good. But if you dig really deep and you think really hard, you could come up with an explanation how what he's doing is really good. A person is obligated to try and do that and come up with something with an explanation. Bidon lekaf schus, judge this person favorably. However, somebody that is known to be wicked, somebody that is known to be bad, that person you're not necessarily obligated to judge favorably because you can assume that what that person is doing is a negative deed. Obviously, just to point out that if you see somebody else endangering somebody else, then that's a different story, and obviously you have to put a stop to that. The Chafetz Chaim writes that a person has to be very, very careful to judge someone else favorably because God judges us the way we judge other people. If you look through our own life and when God judges us at the end of our lifetime, anything that you do, you can always say that it wasn't 100% good. Even if somebody did a mitzvah, he says, the Chafetz Chaim. Even if somebody did a mitzvah, God can always look at that and say, you didn't do it perfectly. Or even if you did it perfectly, you didn't do it with love and fear. You didn't do it out of passion, out of excitement. And for sure, your sins, for sure your averos, God will judge harshly. So therefore, it's very important that you should judge somebody else favorably. Then when it will come to you, God will judge you favorably. And even things which appear to be that you did wrong, God will say, oh, it was only by mistake, or you didn't really mean it. It was just by accident. There's an interesting expression here when it says "V'havidon es kol ha'adam." It could have just said judge a person favorably. Why does it say "V'havidon es kol ha'adam," which literally is translated as the whole person? And the answer is that a lot of times when you look at somebody and you see them doing something wrong, and it's clearly something wrong, that becomes the way that you look at the whole person. A lot of times you define a person based on the one action that you saw them do. And that's what the Mishna is teaching us. Havidon es kol ha'adam. Judge the entire person. Don't just judge one thing that this person did one time in his lifetime. Don't let that define them. Rather, look at the whole picture. Look at the entire person, and you'll find that there is a lot of good in that person. There's a deeper meaning over here that the Avodas Yisrael, one of the commentaries says in this statement, Havidon es kol ha'adam lekaf schus. Judge everybody favorably. And he says like this. In the Talmud it says that a person has to look at the world as if it's an equal scale. That it's half good and half bad. And the one action that you do, it says, so if you do one good action, that can tip the scale and lead the whole world towards Yeshua v'Hatzalah, towards salvation. And he says that's what it means over here. When you do something, that actually judges as kol adam. That will judge everybody favorably. Meaning when you do one good deed, that will affect the entire world, that will affect the entire civilization, that it should be machriya es atzmoi as kol olam kulei lekaf schus, that he should tip himself, and as kol adam lekaf schus, the entire population, the entire world towards merit, and to bring to the entire world Yeshua v'Hatzalah, true salvation.